The silence of deep space was broken by the faint hum of the Celestial Harmony's communication array. As it drifted through the outer rim of the Xerian system, Ambassador Kepha of the Galactic Concord adjusted her iridescent blue tendrils nervously, her three eyes fixed on the cascading data streams that flowed across the holographic displays. The diplomatic vessel had been en route to the neutral zone, for what should have been a routine mediation between the warring Zephyrian Empire and the Silicon Collective, a conflict that had been simmering for the better part of a galactic cycle. Status report, Navigator Thex. Kepha's voice resonated through the bridge with the melodic quality typical of her species. The Vorthuk, though today it carried an undertone of unease that hadn't been there when they'd departed from Concord. Prime, Navigator Thex. A crystalline being whose faceted form caught and refracted the bridge's soft lighting into rainbow patterns, turned from his station with movements that chimed like wind chimes. We are maintaining course. Ambassador, ETA. To the neutral zone is approximately 14 standard hours. However, he paused, his internal luminescence flickering with uncertainty. We've been detecting some unusual subspace disturbances in this sector. Nothing threatening, but the patterns are unfamiliar. Kepha's tendrils curled slightly, a sign of contemplation among her people. In her 3 decades of diplomatic service, she had learned to trust her instincts, and something about this mission felt different. The Zephyrian Silicon conflict had been relatively contained, affecting only a handful of systems on the galactic periphery. It was exactly the kind of dispute the Concord specialized in resolving through careful negotiation and compromise. Yet the urgency in the Council's orders had seemed disproportionate to the threat level. Maintain course, she decided, settling back into her bioform chair, and continue monitoring those disturbances. If they intensify, I want to know immediately. What neither Kepha nor anyone else aboard the Celestial Harmony knew was that their ship's quantum entanglement communicator had developed a microscopic fault in its dimensional stabilization matrix 3 days prior. The fault was so minute that it didn't affect normal operations, but it did cause their transmissions to bleed through into parallel quantum frequencies that, unknown to the galaxy at large, were monitored by a species that had been classified as extinct in all official Concord records for over 2 centuries. Deep in the ship's communication bay, Chief Communications Officer Zarin was conducting her routine diagnostic checks when she noticed an anomaly in the transmission logs. The insectoid officer's compound eyes focused on the data stream, her mandibles clicking softly as she processed the information. According to the logs, their last diplomatic update to Concord Command had been transmitted successfully, but there was a secondary echo, a ghost signal, that seemed to have bounced off some kind of quantum resonance field. Curious, she muttered, her voice carrying the characteristic buzzing undertone of her species. She pulled up the transmission content, scrolling through the standard diplomatic protocols and status reports. Everything appeared normal. Their mission parameters, the estimated timeline for reaching the neutral zone, their current location, and the nature of the conflict they were meant to resolve. But what Zarin couldn't have known was that this routine diplomatic transmission had been intercepted by something far more significant than a simple quantum echo. 67 light-years away, in a region of space that appeared empty on every galactic chart, a massive structure hung in the void, a construct so vast that it dwarfed entire star systems, yet remained completely invisible to conventional sensors through technology that the rest of the galaxy had only theorized about. The structure was home to the remnants of humanity, a species that had vanished from known space after what galactic historians called the Great Silence 137 years ago. The official records stated that humanity had fallen victim to their own violent nature, destroying themselves in a cascade of wars that had consumed their entire civilization. The few alien species that had encountered humans before their disappearance had described them as primitive, aggressive, and ultimately self-destructive, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and warfare. But the truth was far more complex and far more terrifying. Within the hidden megastructure known as the Sanctuary, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display showing the intercepted transmission. Her weathered face, marked by decades of military service and the weight of impossible decisions, remained impassive as she studied the data around her. The command center buzzed with quiet activity as hundreds of officers from various human colonies and Ark ships coordinated the operations of humanity's hidden fleet. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, a young officer whose family had been born on one of the Deep Space Generation ships. "We've confirmed the transmission's origin. It's definitely from a Galactic Concorde diplomatic vessel currently en route to mediate a conflict in the Zirian system." Admiral Chen nodded slowly, her enhanced neural implants processing the implications at superhuman speed. The transmission itself was unremarkable standard diplomatic chatter about a minor territorial dispute, but what made it significant was that it had been intercepted at all. For over 2 centuries, humanity had maintained perfect communications, blackout, ensuring that no trace of their survival would reach the galaxy that had once sought to destroy them. Analysis of the quantum signature suggests their communicator has developed a fault, continued Jackson. The bleed-through appears to be unintentional on their part. Unintentional or not, they now represent a potential security breach, Admiral. Chen replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. "What's our current fleet status?" "The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet is conducting exercises in the Kepler Void, approximately 40 light-years from the diplomatic vessel's position," reported Commander Lisa Park, the Admiral's Chief of Staff. "They could intercept within 18 hours if we authorize fold space jump." Admiral Chen turned to study the tactical display, her mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. The Galactic Concorde believed humanity was extinct, and that belief had been carefully cultivated and maintained for over 2 centuries. It was the foundation of Operation Lazarus, humanity's greatest deception and their ultimate survival strategy. The truth was that humanity hadn't destroyed itself in civil war. They had been the victims of something far worse, a coordinated genocide attempt by a coalition of 12 galactic powers who had identified humanity as an existential threat to galactic stability. The coalition had been led by the Vorthok, the same species now serving as the Concorde's primary diplomatic corps. The Great Silence had been humanity's response to the attempt at genocide. Using technology that they had developed in secret, they had faked their own extinction while simultaneously evacuating every human colony and outpost to hidden locations beyond the galaxy's spiral. Arms, for over 2 centuries, they had been growing, learning, and preparing for the day when they would return to reclaim their place in the galaxy. But that day was not supposed to be today. "Admiral," spoke Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief xenobiologist and one of the few humans who had been alive during the original Exodus, "we need to consider the implications carefully. If we intervene now, we risk exposing our existence decades before we're ready for full revelation." Admiral Chen appreciated the doctor's caution, but she also understood the stakes. The intercepted transmission contained detailed information about Concorde fleet movements, diplomatic protocols, and most critically, the location of several key strategic installations. If that information fell into the wrong hands, specifically into the hands of the very species that had once tried to exterminate humanity, it could compromise Operation Lazarus entirely. "There's another factor to consider," added Commander Park, highlighting a section of the transmission data. "The diplomatic vessel is carrying Ambassador Kethva." The name sent a chill through the command center. Ambassador Kethva wasn't just any Vorthok diplomat. She was the great-granddaughter of Elder Kethmer, who had been one of the primary architects of the genocide attempt. Her family had built their political dynasty on the foundation of protecting the galaxy from the human threat. "That settles it," Admiral Chen decided. "We can't allow her to return to Concorde space with potential intelligence about our activities." Commander Park, signal the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. They are to intercept and contain the diplomatic vessel using Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets, a set of procedures designed to deal with accidental contact situations while maintaining the illusion of their extinction. It involved the use of advanced stealth technology, psychological manipulation, and if necessary, selective memory alteration to ensure that any witnesses to human Activity would either be unable to report it or would not be believed if they tried. As the orders were transmitted across the quantum network, Admiral Chen couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down upon her. For over 2 centuries, humanity had remained hidden, building their strength and waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. They had grown from a few million survivors scattered across hidden colonies to a civilization numbering in the billions, spread across hundreds of secret installations throughout the galaxy. Their technology had advanced beyond anything the Galactic Concord could imagine. Their military forces had been trained to fight not just battles, but entire wars across multiple dimensions and timelines. Their intelligence networks had infiltrated every major galactic power, gathering information and preparing for the day of reckoning. But perhaps most importantly, they had learned the true nature of the galaxy they had once called home, the Galactic Concord. For all its rhetoric about peace and cooperation, was built on a foundation of fear and oppression. Species that showed too much independence or innovation were quietly eliminated or absorbed. The very diversity that the Concord claimed to celebrate was actually carefully managed and controlled to prevent any single species from becoming too powerful. Humanity's crime hadn't been their violence or their ambition, it had been their potential. They had developed faster than light travel, advanced AI systems, and genetic enhancement technologies decades ahead of their supposed galactic peers. They had been on the verge of becoming the dominant species in the galaxy, and the established powers couldn't allow that to happen. Now, as the Third Expeditionary Fleet prepared to reveal themselves for the first time in over 2 centuries, Admiral Chen wondered if they were ready for what would come next. The galaxy had changed in humanity's absence, but so had humanity itself. They were no longer the species that had once sought acceptance and cooperation with their galactic neighbors. They had become something else, something that the galaxy was utterly unprepared to face. The celestial harmony continued its journey through the void, completely unaware that its accidental transmission had just triggered the return of a species that the galaxy had thought extinct. Ambassador Kethva and her crew had no idea that they were about to become the first aliens in over 2 centuries to encounter humanity, and that the encounter would change the fate of the galaxy forever. In the depths of space, the Third Expeditionary Fleet began to move, their ships, invisible to conventional sensors and incorporating technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves, started their journey toward an unsuspecting diplomatic vessel. The crews aboard these ships were the descendants of those who had witnessed the attempted genocide of their species, raised on stories of betrayal and driven by a desire for justice that had been burning for over 2 centuries. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not extinct, and more importantly, it was about to learn what humanity had become in the darkness between the stars. Aboard the Celestial Harmony, Ambassador Kethva had just finished her evening meditation when the ship's emergency klaxons began to wail. The haunting sound echoed through the corridors like the death song of some ancient creature, sending chills down her spine. Despite her diplomatic training, she had heard those alarms only twice before in her career, once during a pirate raid on a convoy she had been traveling with, and once when a diplomatic mission had accidentally strayed into a neutron star's gravity well. All senior staff to the bridge immediately, came Navigator Thex's voice over the intercom, his usual melodic tones now sharp with urgency. We have an unprecedented situation. Kethva's 3 eyes widened simultaneously, a physiological response that hadn't manifested since her academy days. The word unprecedented in galactic diplomatic parlance was reserved for situations that fell completely outside established protocols, events so unusual that they required immediate contact with Concord Command and potentially the evacuation of all non-essential personnel. As she rushed through the corridors, her mind raced through possibilities. Had they encountered some unknown stellar phenomenon? Had the Zephyrian-Silicon conflict escalated beyond their intelligence reports? The thought that chilled her most was the possibility that they had stumbled into territory claimed by one of the galaxy's more aggressive species, the Krillian Hive, perhaps, or the machine consciousness known as the Nexus. The bridge was in controlled chaos when she arrived. Every station was active, Holographic displays showing sensor readings that seemed to defy conventional physics. The most disturbing sight was Navigator Thex himself, his crystalline form flickering between different spectral frequencies, a sign of extreme stress. Among his people, report, Kepha commanded, her diplomatic training overriding her personal anxiety. Ambassador, Thex began, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of barely contained panic. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies approaching our position. Whatever is causing them, it's not showing up on any of our sensors. Chief Science Officer Murden, a heavyset being whose species had evolved on a high-gravity world, looked up from his console with all four of his eyes wide with disbelief. The gravitational signatures suggest objects of immense mass, possibly multiple ships of unprecedented size, but we're getting no visual confirmation, no energy signatures, nothing on electromagnetic spectrum analysis. It's as if space itself is being distorted by something that doesn't exist. Kepha felt her tendrils curl inward, a defensive response she couldn't suppress. How is that possible? Unknown, Ambassador. But that's not the most disturbing part. Murden's thick fingers danced across his console, bringing up a three-dimensional tactical display. The objects, whatever they are, they're moving in perfect formation. This isn't some natural phenomenon. This is artificial. This is intelligent. The tactical display showed the celestial harmony as a small green dot surrounded by a perfect sphere of red markers, each one representing a gravitational anomaly roughly the size of a heavy cruiser. But what made the blood freeze in Kepha's veins was the precision of their movement. The unknown objects were maintaining exact distances from each other and from her ship, moving in patterns that spoke of military discipline and advanced coordination. How many? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. 47 confirmed contacts, Ambassador. Possibly more beyond our sensor range. 47 ships. A full battle fleet. No known species in the galaxy traveled in formations that large, unless they were preparing for war or making a demonstration of power that was intended to be seen across multiple star systems. The fact that these ships were completely invisible to conventional sensors made them infinitely more terrifying. Communications Officer Zarin, Kepha called out, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Are you receiving any transmissions from the unknown contacts? The insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected the bridge lighting as she worked frantically at her station. Nothing on conventional frequencies, Ambassador. But she paused, her mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of confusion among her species. I'm detecting something odd in the quantum substrate. It's almost like someone is scanning our communications array. Not just passively monitoring, but actively examining the hardware itself. The implications hit Kepha like a physical blow. Whatever these ships were, they weren't just observing, they were learning. They were studying the Celestial Harmony's technology with methods so advanced that they could analyze quantum-level structures remotely. Ambassador, Navigator Thex's voice carried a new note of terror. The unknown contacts are changing position. They're closing in. The tactical display updated, showing the red markers beginning to collapse inward toward the Celestial Harmony. The movement was slow, deliberate, and utterly inexorable. Whatever these ships were, they weren't rushing to attack, they were demonstrating their complete control over the situation. Shields to maximum, Kepha ordered, and prepare to transmit a priority emergency signal to Concord Command. Shields are up. But Ambassador, Murden's voice carried a note of helplessness. Our defensive systems are designed to protect against energy weapons and kinetic impacts. I have no idea how effective they'll be against technology that can manipulate spacetime itself. As if in response to his words, the Celestial Harmony suddenly lurched violently to one side. The inertial dampeners struggled to compensate, and several officers had to grab onto their stations to avoid being thrown to the deck. But what was truly terrifying was that the sensors showed no evidence of any weapon impact or external force. Hull integrity holding, reported the ship's AI in its maddeningly calm voice. No evidence of weapons fire or collision detected. Then what the hell just happened? Murden demanded, his four eyes scanning his instruments frantically. The answer came from an unexpected source, the main view screen, which had been showing the star field ahead of them. suddenly flickered and went black. For a moment, the bridge was filled with the ominous darkness of dead space. Then, slowly, an image began to form. It was a face unmistakably humanoid in structure, but unlike anything in the known galaxy. The being had pale skin marked with subtle patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Its eyes were an impossible shade of blue that seemed to contain depths that went beyond the physical. Most disturbing of all, it wore an expression of cold intelligence that spoke of vast experience and carefully controlled anger. "Greetings, Ambassador Kepha of the Galactic Concord," the being said, its voice carrying through the bridge's speakers with perfect clarity. Despite the fact that no communication channel had been established, "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, Human Colonial Forces." The words hit the bridge like a physical shockwave. Several officers actually stumbled backward, their species' various physiological responses to extreme shock manifesting simultaneously. Navigator X's crystalline form went completely transparent for a moment, before flickering back to visibility. Chief Science Officer Murden's for eyes all focused on the screen, with the intensity of someone staring at the impossible. That's not possible," Kepha whispered, her voice barely audible above the bridge's humming systems. "Humans are extinct. They destroyed themselves over 2 centuries ago." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested that she had heard those words before and found them amusing. "Extinct, is that what your historians teach now? How convenient. Tell me, Ambassador, what else do they teach about humanity's final days?" Kepha's mind raced, trying to process the implications while maintaining her diplomatic composure. According to every historical record she had studied, humanity had fallen victim to a cascade of civil wars that had consumed their entire civilization. The last confirmed contact with human forces had been over 100 years ago, when their final transmission had been a distress call from their homeworld. "REPORTING catastrophic system-wide conflicts. The records state that your species succumbed to internal warfare," she replied, drawing on her diplomatic training to maintain protocol even in the face of the impossible. The final transmissions from human space reported massive civil conflicts that had rendered your worlds uninhabitable. Something that might have been a smile crossed Admiral Chen's face, but it held no warmth. "Ah yes, the civil wars, those transmissions were quite convincing, weren't they? We spent months perfecting them, making sure they would tell exactly the story we wanted the galaxy to believe." The admission hit Kepha like a cold wind. You faked your own extinction. We staged our own death, yes. It was the only way to ensure our survival after the Concord's attempted genocide." Admiral Chen's voice carried a weight of history and pain that made the bridge's atmosphere feel heavy. "Operation Lazarus, we called it, the greatest deception in galactic history, born from the galaxy's greatest betrayal. Genocide?" Kepha's tendrils coiled tightly around themselves. "The Concord has never engaged in genocide. We are peacekeepers, diplomats, are you?" Admiral Chen interrupted, her voice cutting through Kepha's protests like a blade. "Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know about the Keras Initiative, the Stellar Cleansing Protocol, the Biological Harmonization Project?" Each name hit Kepha like a physical blow. These were classified operations, some of them so secret that only the highest levels of the Concord Command knew about them. The fact that this supposedly extinct human knew about them suggested intelligence capabilities that defied everything she understood about galactic politics. "I see from your expression that you recognize at least some of those names," Admiral Chen continued. "The Keras Initiative was particularly elegant, convincing target species to relocate to safer worlds that just happened to have atmospheric compositions that would slowly sterilize them over several generations. The Stellar Cleansing Protocol was more direct, triggering solar flares in systems where problematic species had their primary colonies. As for the Biological Harmonization Project," "Stop," Kepha said, her voice barely above a whisper. These are conspiracy theories, unsubstantiated rumors spread by species that couldn't adapt to galactic civilization." "Conspiracy theories?" Admiral Chen's laugh was like ice cracking. "Ambassador, We have documentary evidence of 12 separate attempts to eliminate humanity. Through various Concord operations, we have recordings of the planning sessions, copies of the authorization codes, even the personal logs of the officials who ordered our extinction. The main view screen split, showing Admiral Chen's face alongside what appeared to be official Concord documents. Kethva recognized the format immediately. These were authentic command-level authorizations, complete with the quantum encryption signatures that made them impossible to forge. Operation Silence, Admiral Chen read from one of the documents. Objective: complete elimination of human presence in galactic space through coordinated military action and biological warfare. Authorization level: Concord Prime. Estimated duration: 6 months. Acceptable collateral damage: unlimited. Kethva felt her legs weaken. The document was signed by Elder Kethmer, her own great-grandfather, one of the most revered figures in Concord history. The being she had been taught to admire as a paragon of diplomatic virtue had authorized the complete extermination of an entire species. "This is impossible," she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. "The Concord doesn't engage in military action. We don't have the capability for what you're describing." "Oh, but you do," Admiral Chen replied. "You just don't advertise it." The Concord maintains 17 separate military organizations, each one officially denied and carefully hidden from public knowledge. The Pacification Corps, the Harmony Enforcers, the Stellar Intervention Force. Shall I continue? Each name was another knife thrust. These were organizations that Kethva had heard whispered about in the darkest corners of diplomatic gatherings, but which no one ever acknowledged openly. They were the Concord's shadow, the violent enforcement mechanism that made their peaceful facade possible. "But we survived," Admiral Chen continued, her voice gaining strength. "We saw the preparations, intercepted the communications, and we had something that you didn't expect. We had time to prepare. While you were planning our extinction, we were planning our resurrection." The view screen changed again, showing images that made Kethva's mind reel. Massive space stations that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Fleets of ships whose designs seemed to incorporate technology that was decades ahead of current galactic standards. Planets that had been completely transformed into fortress worlds, their surfaces covered with installations that hummed with barely contained power. "For over 2 centuries, we have been growing, learning, and waiting," Admiral Chen explained. "We have spread across regions of space that your maps mark as empty void. We have developed technologies that your scientists can barely theorize about. We have become something that the galaxy is utterly unprepared to face." What do you want from us?" Kethva asked, her diplomatic training finally reasserting itself despite the overwhelming revelations. Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That depends, Ambassador. Are you here as a representative of the organization that tried to exterminate my species? Or are you here as an individual who has just learned that everything she believed about galactic history is a lie?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Kethva realized that her answer would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy. The humans hadn't just survived, they had thrived, and they had spent over 2 centuries preparing for this moment. She began, then stopped. How could she answer such a question? How could she choose between her loyalty to the Concord and her growing horror at what she was learning about its true nature? "Take your time, Ambassador," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying a note of what might have been sympathy. "But understand that your ship's accidental transmission has already set events in motion. That cannot be stopped. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity is not extinct. The question is whether that revelation comes through diplomatic channels or through demonstration of force." As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display updated once more. The 47 ships surrounding the Celestial Harmony had been joined by dozens more, their gravitational signatures appearing on the sensors like stars being born in the void. Kethva realized with growing horror that she was witnessing the arrival of a fleet that could probably challenge the combined military forces of the entire galactic Concord. "How many ships do you have?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Admiral Chen's smile was razor-sharp. "Enough, Ambassador, more than enough. The silence that followed Admiral Chen's words stretched across the bridge, like a living thing, heavy with implications that none of the Celestial Harmony's crew could fully comprehend. Kethva stared at the tactical display, watching as more and more gravitational signatures appeared on their sensors, each one representing a ship that could probably destroy her vessel with a single weapon discharge. But it was the expression on Admiral Chen's face that truly terrified her. There was no hatred there, no burning desire for revenge. Instead, there was something far more dangerous: the cold, calculated patience of someone who had spent centuries planning for this exact moment. "Admiral," Kethva said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What happens now?" Now, Admiral Chen's image leaned forward slightly, her impossible blue eyes seeming to look directly into Kethva's soul. "Now you get to see what your people's peaceful concord has driven us to become. But first, there's someone I think you should meet." The view screen split once more, and a new face appeared alongside Admiral Chen's. This one was older, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held depths of pain that spoke of unspeakable loss. But what made Kethva's 3 hearts skip beats was the ceremonial scarring on the being's face patterns that she recognized from her diplomatic studies. "This is Captain Marcus Webb," Admiral Chen announced, formerly of the Terran Colonial Defense Force, currently commander of the Dreadnought Remembrance. "Captain Webb has a particular interest in meeting representatives of the Galactic Concord." Captain Webb's voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of someone who had witnessed horrors beyond imagination. "Ambassador Kethva, I believe you might recognize these coordinates." The screen displayed a star chart showing a system that Kethva did indeed recognize: the Kepler 442 system, site of one of the Concord's most celebrated diplomatic victories. "The Kepler 442 system," she said slowly. "That was where the Concord mediated the peace between the Terran colonies and the Altarian Republic. It was considered one of our greatest diplomatic achievements." Captain Webb's laugh was bitter. "Diplomatic achievement? Is that what they taught you?" "Ambassador, I was there. I was commanding the orbital defense platform when your mediators arrived. Would you like to know what really happened during that peaceful negotiation?" Before Kethva could respond, the view screen changed, showing what appeared to be historical footage. The image quality was rough, clearly recorded during combat conditions, but the content was undeniably clear. She could see Concord vessels, ships bearing the diplomatic seal she had served under for decades, opening fire on civilian stations. She watched in horror as escape pods were systematically hunted down and destroyed. The Altarian Republic had agreed to mediate, Captain Webb continued, his voice steady despite the obvious pain the memories caused. "They were supposed to help us reach a peaceful resolution to our territorial dispute. Instead, they used the meeting as cover for a coordinated attack. 3 million civilians died in the first hour." Kethva felt physically ill. That's not possible. "The Concord doesn't engage in military action. We're mediators, peacekeepers, you're exterminators," Captain Webb interrupted. "The Altarians were given a choice after the massacre: help finish the job or be next on the list. They chose to help. The official records show that the human colonies agreed to relocation to safer worlds. What those records don't mention is that we were relocated at gunpoint to planets that had been deliberately contaminated with biological agents." The footage continued, showing images that would haunt Kethva's dreams for the rest of her life. She saw families being herded onto transport ships, their faces filled with terror and confusion. She saw the orbital bombardment of colonies that had refused to relocate. She saw the aftermath: empty worlds where millions had once lived, their surfaces scarred by weapons that officially didn't exist. Of the 47 human colony worlds in the Kepler sector, Captain Webb said, only 3 survived the relocation process. The populations of those 3 worlds were reduced by 96% within 18 months, due to the biological contamination. The Concord classified this as a successful mediation and moved on to the next problem species. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the horrific images. Captain Webb is one of only 12 humans who survived the Kepler massacre. He spent 47 years in Concord protective custody, which is to say, in a prison camp that officially didn't exist. He escaped during a prisoner transport and made it to one of our evacuation ships just before Operation Lazarus was implemented. Kefva's mind reeled. Everything she had been taught about the Concorde's history, every principle she had built her career on, was crumbling before her eyes. How is this possible? How could such operations be hidden from the general population? The same way they always have been, Admiral Chen replied. Compartmentalization, need-to-know protocols, and the simple fact that most Concorde citizens don't want to know the truth. It's easier to believe in the peaceful facade than to confront the reality of what your civilization is built on. The tactical display updated again, showing that the human fleet had grown to over 100 ships. But more disturbing was the fact that they were no longer just surrounding the celestial harmony. They were moving into formation around something much larger. What is that? Navigator X asked, his crystalline form flickering with confused harmonics as he tried to process the sensor data. Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. That Navigator is the Sanctuary Humanity's mobile command center and our most heavily defended installation. It's also about to become the site of a very important demonstration. The view screen changed once more, showing an external view of the celestial harmony. But the small diplomatic vessel was now dwarfed by something that defied comprehension. A structure so massive that it seemed to bend space around itself was materializing out of what had appeared to be empty void. It was clearly artificial, but its design incorporated elements that seemed to flow and shift like living tissue. The sanctuary is approximately 400 kilometers in diameter, Admiral Chen explained with obvious pride. It houses the primary archives of human civilization, our central military command, and a population of roughly 50 million. It's also completely mobile and can relocate to any point in the galaxy within 72 hours, Chief Science Officer Murden S. eyes were wide with disbelief. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of most star systems. How do you power something like that? We've learned to harness sources of energy that your science hasn't even theorized about yet, Admiral Chen replied. To centuries of focused research and development tends to produce interesting results, especially when your survival depends on maintaining technological superiority. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated the extent of humanity's transformation. Without warning, the sanctuary began to change. Its surface rippled like water, and structures that had been invisible moments before began to emerge. Weapon platforms that dwarfed the celestial harmony extended from hidden bays. Defensive barriers that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself formed around the massive installation. This is a Type 7 defensive configuration, Admiral Chen explained conversationally. It's designed to engage multiple fleet-sized threats simultaneously, while maintaining full mobility. The sanctuary can fight off the combined military forces of 3 galactic powers, while simultaneously coordinating the activities of our entire colonial network. Kefva realized with growing horror that she was witnessing the reveal of a military capability that could challenge the entire galactic order. How many installations like this do you have? Enough, Admiral Chen replied, using the same words she had used earlier. But that's not the most important question, Ambassador. The most important question is what we intend to do with them. The view screen split once more, showing Admiral Chen alongside what appeared to be a galactic map. But this map was unlike any Kefva had ever seen. It showed not just the known galaxy, but regions beyond the spiral arms that were marked with symbols indicating human presence. The scope was staggering. Humanity had spread across regions of space that were literally off every known chart. For over 2 centuries, we have been preparing for this moment, Admiral Chen continued. We have built a civilization that spans regions of space your people have never explored. We have developed technologies that would seem like magic to your scientists. We have created a military force that could reshape the galaxy according to our will. But, she continued, and her voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. We have also learned from our mistakes. We remember what it was like to be the victims of genocide. We remember what it was like to be hunted and driven from our homes. We remember what it was like to watch our families die for the crime of being different. The implications of her words hit Kefva like a physical blow. You're planning to do to us what we did to you, are we? Admiral Chen's smile was enigmatic. That would be justice, wouldn't it? An eye for an eye, a civilization for a civilization. Your people tried to exterminate us after all. By your own logic, you've forfeited any right to exist. The bridge of the celestial harmony was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Every member of the crew was staring at the view screen, waiting for Admiral Chen to pronounce sentence on their entire civilization. But Admiral Chen continued, "Justice and revenge are not the same thing. We have had over the centuries to consider our response to the Concorde's crimes. We could have returned years ago when we first achieved technological superiority. We could have begun a campaign of systematic extermination that would have made your attempts at genocide look like playground squabbles. Then why didn't you?" Kefva asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Because Admiral Chen replied, we learned something during our exile that your people have never understood. We learned that survival is not about being the strongest or the most ruthless. It's about being adaptable, innovative, and ultimately about being able to change." The galactic map on the view screen changed, showing shipping routes and trade networks that Kefva recognized from her diplomatic briefings. But overlaid on the familiar patterns were new routes pathways that connected the known galaxy to the regions where humanity had established their hidden civilization. "We have been watching your galaxy for over the centuries," Admiral Chen explained. "We have seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations flourish and die. We have observed the Concorde's methods, studied their patterns, and learned to predict their actions. But we have also seen something else. We have seen the potential for something better." "What do you mean?" Kefva asked, though she had a growing suspicion that she knew where this was leading. "We have seen species that genuinely want peace, civilizations that value cooperation over domination, individuals who choose understanding over fear. The problem is that these voices are drowned out by the systems that the Concorde has created, systems that reward aggression, that punish difference, that turn natural diversity into artificial conflict." Admiral Chen's image leaned forward, her impossible blue eyes focusing intently on Kefva. "You have a choice to make, Ambassador. You can return to the Concorde and report what you've learned here. You can tell them that humanity is not extinct, that we have become something far more powerful than they ever imagined, and that we are prepared to take our place in the galaxy again." Or, Kefva prompted, though she dreaded the answer. Or, Admiral Chen continued, "You can help us change the galaxy into something better. You can help us build a civilization that doesn't require genocide to maintain order, that doesn't need to destroy others to feel secure about itself." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Kefva realized that she was being offered the chance to be part of something that could fundamentally alter the course of galactic history. But she also realized that accepting would mean betraying everything she had been taught to believe about her own civilization. "What would that look like?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Chen's smile was the first genuine expression Kefva had seen from her. "It would look like a galaxy where species could develop to their full potential, without fear of extinction. It would look like a civilization where diversity was celebrated rather than managed. It would look like a future where no one would have to choose between survival and principles. And if I refuse," Admiral Chen's expression grew serious, "then you return to the Concorde, and we begin the process of revealing ourselves to the galaxy. It will be messier, more chaotic, and ultimately, more destructive than it needs to be. But it will happen regardless of your choice, Ambassador. The age of the Concorde's deception is over." As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display updated once more. The human fleet had grown to over 500 ships, and more were arriving every moment. But what truly drove home the scope of humanity's transformation was the arrival of something that made even the sanctuary look small, a structure that was clearly a mobile shipyard, actively constructing new vessels even as it traveled through space. "How long do I have to decide?" Kefva asked, though she already knew that the decision was more complex than a simple yes or no. "You have until we reach the Zirian system," Admiral Chen replied. "That's where the Zephyrian Empire and the Silicon Collective are fighting their little territorial war. It's also where we're going to make our first public appearance in over the centuries. The revelation hit Kethva like a cold wave. "You're going to intervene in the conflict. We're going to end it," Admiral Chen corrected, "and in doing so, we're going to demonstrate to the galaxy that there's an alternative to the Concord's methods. We're going to show them what real peacekeeping looks like." As the celestial harmony was gently, but inexorably pulled into the human fleet's formation, Kethva realized that she was about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The question was whether she would be part of that change, or simply a witness to it. In the depths of space, the largest fleet in galactic history began to move toward a destination that would become the focal point of a new age, and at the center of it all, a single diplomatic vessel carried the weight of a decision that would determine whether that new age would be born in cooperation or in conflict. The journey to the Zirian system took 18 hours, during which Ambassador Kethva experienced the complete reconstruction of her understanding of reality. The celestial harmony traveled at the center of the human fleet, surrounded by ships that defied every principle of physics she had been taught. But more disturbing than the impossible technology was the growing realization that everything she had dedicated her life to was built on a foundation of lies and systematic murder. She had spent those hours in her quarters, reviewing the documentation that Admiral Chen had transmitted to her personal systems. The files were extensive, detailed, and absolutely damning. They contained not just evidence of the Concord's crimes against humanity, but records of dozens of other species that had been quietly eliminated or absorbed over the centuries. The hegemony of Krell, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Walkers, all species that had been written out of history. Their disappearances explained away as natural disasters, civil wars, or simple cultural evolution. But perhaps the most devastating revelation was the discovery of her own family's role in these atrocities. Her great-grandfather, Elder Kethmer, hadn't just authorized humanity's extermination, he had been the architect of the entire system of controlled genocide that the Concord had been using. For over 5 centuries, the Kethmer protocols were a series of procedures designed to identify, isolate, and eliminate any species that showed signs of becoming a threat to the established galactic order. The protocols were elegant in their simplicity and horrifying in their scope. They began with subtle economic pressure and diplomatic isolation, progressed through manufactured conflicts and biological warfare, and culminated in the complete erasure of the target species. From galactic history, the process was designed to look natural, to appear as though the eliminated species had simply failed to adapt to galactic civilization. Kethva had discovered that her own diplomatic career had been built on implementing these protocols. The successful mediations she had been so proud of, the peaceful resolutions that had earned her recognition throughout the Concord, every single one, had been the final stage of a systematic extermination campaign. She had been an executioner, and she had never even known it. The realization had broken something inside her. She had spent decades believing that she was a force for peace in the galaxy, that her work made the universe a better place. Now she understood that she had been nothing more than a tool of genocide, a weapon disguised as a diplomat. When the call came to join Admiral Chen on the Sanctuary, Kethva felt hollow inside. She had made her decision hours ago, but the weight of it still pressed down on her like a physical thing. She was about to betray everything she had been taught to believe, but she was also about to try to prevent the kind of systematic murder that had defined her civilization for centuries. The transport that carried her to the massive human station was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It moved through space without any visible propulsion system, its hull seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. The interior was equally alien corridors that curved in impossible directions, walls that displayed images from depths of space that no known sensors could reach, and a constant sense of being surrounded by intelligence that was vast and utterly inhuman. But it was the humans themselves that truly shocked her. She had expected to find a civilization driven by hatred and a desire for revenge. Instead, she found people who seemed to have transcended the limitations that defined every other species in the galaxy. They moved with fluid grace that spoke of genetic enhancement. Their eyes held depths that suggested expanded consciousness, and their very presence radiated a sense of potential. that was both inspiring and terrifying. Admiral Chen met her in what appeared to be an observation lounge overlooking the sanctuary's central core. The space was vast, with transparent walls that offered a view of the station's interior, a complex ecosystem of technological and biological elements that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. "Welcome aboard the sanctuary, Ambassador," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed genuine. "I know this must be overwhelming for you." Keffa looked out at the impossible vista before her. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. "I want to help you build something better, but I need to understand what that means." Admiral Chen nodded, as if she had expected this response. "It means that you'll be part of the most ambitious project in galactic history. We're not just trying to reform the Concord. We're trying to create an entirely new model of galactic civilization." "How?" Keffa asked. "How do you change something that's been in place for centuries?" "You start by demonstrating that there's a better way," Admiral Chen replied. "And that demonstration begins in about 6 hours, when we arrive at the Zirian system." The main display activated, showing a tactical overview of the conflict zone. Keffa could see the dispositions of the Zephyrian and Silicon collective fleets. Locked in a standoff that had been grinding on for months, the two sides were evenly matched, which meant that the conflict could continue indefinitely unless something changed the balance of power. The Zephyrian Empire and the Silicon Collective are fighting over mining rights to the Zirian asteroid belt, Admiral Chen explained. "It's a relatively minor dispute, but it's been escalating because both sides believe that backing down will make them look weak. The Concord has been mediating for 6 months, but their mediation consists mainly of selling weapons to both sides and waiting for one of them to exhaust their resources. And when that happens?" Keffa asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The Concord will step in to restore order," Admiral Chen replied. "They'll absorb the surviving forces of both sides into their own military, claim the asteroid belt as a protected zone, and both the Zephyrian Empire and the Silicon Collective will find themselves reduced to client states. It's the same pattern they've used dozens of times before. But you're going to stop it. We're going to end it," Admiral Chen corrected, "but not through force. We're going to show both sides that there's a solution to their conflict that doesn't require either of them to surrender their independence." The tactical display changed, showing the human fleet's approach vector. They were coming in from the galactic rim, emerging from regions of space that appeared empty on every known star chart. But what struck Keffa was the formation they were maintaining. It wasn't a battle formation, but rather a configuration designed for maximum visibility and minimum threat. "You're announcing yourselves," she realized. "We're making an entrance," Admiral Chen agreed. "The galaxy is about to learn that humanity is not extinct, and we want to make sure that lesson is memorable." As if on cue, the observation lounges displays activated, showing feeds from across the Zirian system. Keffa could see the reactions of the various fleets as the human formation began to appear on their sensors. The response was immediate and predictable: panic, confusion, and the rapid activation of weapons systems. Unknown vessels. Came a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet commander. "You are entering a restricted combat zone. Identify yourselves immediately or we will open fire." Admiral Chen's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the system would hear it. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Forces. We are here to end this conflict and demonstrate that there is an alternative to the cycle of violence that has defined this galaxy for too long." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, almost simultaneously, came responses from both fleets. "Impossible," transmitted the Silicon Collective commander. "Humans are extinct. This is some kind of deception. Human forces were eliminated over 2 centuries ago," added the Zephyrian commander. "Whatever you are not human." Admiral Chen's laugh was carried across the void. "Then let us refresh your memory about what humanity is capable of." What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy changed forever. The human fleet, which had been maintaining a peaceful formation, suddenly transformed. Ships that had appeared to be simple cruisers revealed themselves as massive dreadnoughts, Vessels that had looked like support craft deployed weapons, systems that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. And at the center of it all, the sanctuary itself began to reconfigure, its hull plates shifting to reveal structures that seemed to bend space around themselves. But it wasn't the display of military might that shocked the watching fleets. It was what the humans did next. Instead of opening fire, instead of demanding surrender, they began to solve the problem that had brought the two sides to war in the first place. The asteroid belt that the Zephyrian Empire and Silicon Collective had been fighting over was rich in rare minerals, essential for advanced technology. Both sides needed these resources, but the belt's complex orbital mechanics made it impossible to mine safely. While maintaining territorial claims, the conflict had arisen because traditional mining methods would require one side to cede control of strategic positions to the other. The humans solved this in a matter of minutes. Using technology that seemed to manipulate matter at the molecular level, they began to extract the valuable minerals from the asteroids while simultaneously restructuring the belt's orbital mechanics. Within hours, they had created a stable configuration that would allow both sides to mine the resources they needed without compromising their strategic positions. There, Admiral Chen announced to the stunned fleets, "The resource dispute that has been the source of your conflict has been resolved. The asteroid belt has been restructured to allow for sustainable mining operations by both parties, with yields that will exceed your previous projections by approximately 300%. The silence that followed was broken by the Zephyrian commander. How is this possible?" "It's possible because we approach problems differently," Admiral Chen replied. "Instead of asking who should control the resources, we asked how the resources could be shared in a way that benefits everyone." But the humans weren't finished. What happened next demonstrated the true scope of their transformation. They began to share technology, not weapons or military systems, but innovations that would revolutionize both civilizations. Medical advances that could extend lifespans by centuries, energy systems that could power entire worlds without environmental impact, manufacturing processes that could create materials that were stronger than anything currently known. "This is what we offer," Admiral Chen announced. "Not conquest, not domination, but partnership. We have spent over 2 centuries developing technologies and social systems that can benefit all species in the galaxy. We are prepared to share these advances with anyone who is willing to abandon the old patterns of conflict and embrace a new model of cooperation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Both fleets began to stand down, their commanders eager to learn more about the technologies that had been demonstrated. But more importantly, they began to communicate with each other for the first time in months, not as enemies, but as potential partners in exploring the possibilities that humanity had revealed. Keffa watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and growing understanding. This was what Admiral Chen had meant when she talked about building something better. The humans weren't trying to impose their will on the galaxy. They were trying to show other species that there were alternatives to the patterns of conflict that had defined galactic civilization. "For centuries, it's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's just the beginning," Admiral Chen replied. "What you're seeing here is a proof of concept. We're demonstrating that conflicts can be resolved through innovation, rather than force, that problems can be solved through cooperation rather than competition. And the Concord," Admiral Chen's expression grew serious, "the Concord will not be pleased by what has happened here today. They rely on conflict to maintain their position, and we have just eliminated one of their most useful tools. They will respond, and when they do, we will be ready." As if summoned by her words, the tactical display updated to show new rivals at the edge of the system. Keffa recognized the signatures immediately, a Concord peacekeeping fleet, arriving to restore order to the conflict zone. But instead of finding a war to mediate, they found a solved problem and two former enemies working together to explore new possibilities. "This is Fleet Admiral Murthic of the Galactic Concord," came a transmission from the lead ship. "All vessels in this system are ordered to stand down immediately. The Zirian system is under Concord jurisdiction, and any unauthorized military presence will be considered an act of aggression." Admiral Chen's response was calm and measured. Fleet Admiral Murthuk, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Forces. The conflict in the system has been resolved through peaceful negotiation and mutual cooperation. There is no need for Concord intervention. Human Colonial Forces. Murthuk's voice carried a note of disbelief. Impossible. Human forces were eliminated over 2 centuries ago. Whatever deception you are attempting, it ends now. No, Fleet Admiral, Admiral Chen replied, her voice carrying a weight of history and determination. The deception that ends now is the one that your people have been perpetrating. For over 2 centuries, the galaxy will now learn the truth about what the Concord really is, and what it has done to maintain its power. The moment of truth had arrived. The secret that had been kept for over 2 centuries was about to be revealed to the galaxy at large, and at the center of it all. Ambassador Kepha of the Galactic Concord stood beside Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Forces, ready to help build a new future from the ashes of the old. The age of the Concord's deception was over. The age of humanity's return had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.